Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us for this Career Expo session. My name is Stelzer, and I'm one of the talent acquisition recruiters for NBC News Group. Unfortunately, Isabel Sanchez couldn't join us due to a personal emergency, so I'm going to be moderating today's session. But you're joining us now for the final portion of today's summit. So we're going to be discussing what you need to know about your audience when looking for a job. You're going to learn how to research job descriptions, what to know before speaking with a recruiter or hiring manager. There's a lot to learn about a show and network and brand associated with the role. So we're going to break all this down for you and explain the nuance of each part of NBCUniversal. Joining me here today, we have two wonderful panelists that are going to help me tackle this subject, starting off with one of our principal recruiters for NBC Sports, Ed Asuncion, and Megan Horan, who's one of our NBCUniversal Entertainment principal recruiters. So want to mention too, if you in the audience have questions, please feel free to put those in the chat and we'll get to them throughout this discussion. You can also signal to our team if you'd like to come on camera to get, have your question answered. So don't be shy and put on your game face because Ed, Megan, and I, might be some of the people that are hiring you for future jobs. So without further ado, half the battle of knowing your audience in a job search is brand awareness. So for applicants, it's important to know, what a brand sees as important before applying for a job. So let's start by, we'll each, explain what applicants need to know about each of our parts of the business. So Ed, if you wouldn't mind starting and just telling us, kind of what is specific to NBC Sports Next as a brand.
Yeah, thanks, Allie, and good afternoon, everybody. So honored to be part of this. Like Allie had mentioned, I'm part of NBC Sports and NBC Sports Next. And I think when you think about NBC Sports, most people really associate everything that we see from a programming standpoint, everything from a broadcast, everything we see on TV. I mean, if you're a sports fan, you're watching football, this kind of stuff. But some of the things that I recruit for are within probably a little bit lesser known, a little bit less aware, and that's NBC Sports Next. Now, what is NBC Sports Next? It's pretty much what we call the home of all of our digital apps and technology. We have a phrase on our campuses here, meet us at the intersection of sports and technology, and that's really what it is. When we think about broadcast and NBC Sports, that's been the traditional way of reaching our audiences. So now we're moving into the digital age, and we're all looking down at all these different devices. We're all consuming media and all this subject matter in a different way. And NBC Sports created NBC Sports Next. What's next? How it breaks down is we really focus on a couple different buckets, or a few buckets. One is our golf group. We also have another group that's focused on youth and rec sports, and a new exciting area of emerging media. When you look at the products within those buckets, you may have seen these products and maybe not even aware that you're using them under NBC Sports Next. So golf usually has Golf Now, which is on our online tee time marketplace, and Golf Pass, which is pretty much an ultimate membership where you can get discounts and instruction and retail discounts. And we've recently partnered that with Rory McIlroy, who kind of heads that. And then within the youth rec sports area, we have our whole suite of products under what's called Sports Engine. And that's technology that really helps youth and rec sports coaches, parents, volunteers really organize better. You think about the old days when you're coming out to the park and like signing up for soccer and everything like that. And now we, it was the old school kind of paper trails and all that. And now we have digital apps that really help these folks, organize, get the communication going, and really connect people to what they love to do. So that's really my side of NBC Sports Next, and the brands that help you understand kind of the background of when you're applying, whether it's on the broadcast side or the digital side.
Awesome. Thanks, Ed. So Megan, how are roles unique to, each show and network on the entertainment side of NBCUniversal?
Great. Thanks, Allie. And again, I'm Megan Horan. It's nice to see everybody here today. Excited to speak with you all. As Allie mentioned, I do support our recruiting for our entertainment efforts here at NBCUniversal. So to kind of break down some of those brands for you here, it really is a difference between essentially the productions that we're focusing on here at NBC Universal and then our networks as well. So I'm sure many of you are familiar with our different productions that we have, both filming on the West Coast and the East Coast. I specifically focus on a lot of our East Coast hiring. So that's going to be productions like Tonight Show with Jimmy Fallon, The Late Night with Seth Meyers, SNL. We have some great productions happening out of our Stanford Media Center as well, Karamo and the Steve Wilkos Show. And of course, recently, very exciting, having Kelly Clarkson move over to join us to film out of 30 Rock in New York City. So, well, those are very exciting and big shows that we all know and love, and want to work on the more production side. That's going to be working in more of that on-set type of environment. That's a smaller component than, say, what we would call our corporate entertainment hiring that we're doing. On the corporate side, that's really going to be supporting our networks that we have, our entertainment networks specifically. So if you think Bravo, Sci-Fi, Oxygen, Universal Kids, right? Those are networks where we're hiring folks that are kind of behind the scenes. That's going to be everything and anything from somebody that's editing promos to doing marketing, social media, and everything in between. So when it comes to kind of brand awareness, when you're applying for a position, when you're looking at a job description, and the job description is going to detail out what brand or what show you'd be focusing on, I think my biggest tip is to be able to show your passion and your enthusiasm and your familiarity, right, with the different brand or the network that you are looking to join the team on. I would say, I've been on many conversations with candidates, and, I'll kind of ask them, hey, you're going to be supporting this team, supporting Sci-Fi and USA. Are you familiar with those shows? Is that something that you're excited to work on? And I might receive an answer that says, oh, actually, I don't watch TV, which is interesting, not necessarily, following kind of knowing, that brand. We do want to see that you have that familiarity and that excitement. Or maybe I'll interview somebody to apply for a position at Bravo, and they'll say, oh, you know what, Bravo is my guilty pleasure. But I have to remember, it doesn't need to be your guilty pleasure when, you're joining a team of really excited folks that are passionate about the content and want to see that from you as well. And beyond showing that familiarity and that excitement with just the content itself, I would say you can always take that a step further, right? And that's about connecting the brand with the role that you are applying for, right? So if you're going to be applying for a promo editor position for a specific network, you should familiarize yourselves. What do those promos look like? What are the feel, the tone? We work for a company where our products are out there for you to see on TV, online, and you should have that familiarity. Or if you're going to apply for a social media position for maybe take a look at the social handles, understand, what is doing. Look at those social channels and be able to comment and have a conversation on those. So that's our brands, in the entertainment side, and what I would really encourage you to think about as you are applying to positions within those brands.
Awesome. Thanks, Megan. And before I get into the differences for news, we are going to start letting folks on camera now if they have any questions, just to keep the conversation going. And Benjamin, we saw that you had a question. If you want to hop on camera.
Hi.
Perfect. Yep. And Ben, we'll just to go over your question, you had asked, how do we know when, or how do you know when you're on or not being seen by recruiters when you apply? And, if there's a way to know if you're applying too much or reaching out to connect with recruiters too much. So I didn't know if there was anything you wanted to add to that, or if you wanted to direct it to Ed or Megan in particular.
Yeah. I know you and Allie, you and I have actually talked once before. And just one thing I'm wondering is, as somebody who's young in the newsroom, I'm always told you can reach out to people through LinkedIn. So with that as well, how do you know, if you can answer, when you're being too much and hurting your chances more? If it's your dream job or your dream company, as well as, wondering if you're applying too much. Because I know from what I've been told, sometimes if your name comes across and again, and for certain roles, like then people may push it aside because they see you're trying to go everywhere in a bunch of directions. I know that's a very redundant question, but just to simplify it again, how can you know if you're applying too much and if you're not getting seen in ways to change that?
Yeah, I was going to jump in really quickly. I mean, I think, to me, I don't know if there's a too much. I think it's taking it from a viewpoint of, try to be strategic about it. My question to you, when everything we're talking about, is what kind of roles are they? The same roles? Are they in different divisions? Because like what Megan had mentioned, some of what comes through is connecting the dots. We have certain information that we can see that could be a really good fit for you for this role or what have you, but there might be that small little tool in your tool belt that's a little bit different than somebody else that might actually be the value add that this person needs. So I think just think about it as being strategic. And what I mean by that is if there is a role that maybe isn't your passion, but the job title is there, maybe that isn't something that you might want to apply for, or maybe it's not, a position that's currently a 1-for-1 match, but maybe laterally or what have you. You just have to be a little bit more strategic, I think, in terms of making sure that we see that value, when you come through, and that's what normally comes about. I don't know about anybody else, but that's kind of my thought.
Awesome. So then I also just wanted to address quickly, because I know we have some other questions coming in, and thank you, by the way, Ed. On the news front, because of course it's different from sports, it's different from entertainment. There is, it's different. There's a difference across all news as well. So like there's many variables between markets, stations, networks. So, the way I look at it too, I mean, it really does depend on the network, the brand, the show. But in general, the jump from local to network can be big. An EP at local isn't necessarily going to translate to an executive producer at the network level. Same goes for producer. If you're a producer for local, then you might be more, especially if you're earlier career, might be more of a PA or even an AP at the network level. So it's just kind of be mindful of those things as you're applying. But I do believe we have another question here. Tess Lerman, would want to pivot to you. I believe you had some questions.
Yes, so sorry. I don't really understand what happened with the entering the room. But firstly, Allie, Megan, and Ed, thank you so much for doing this. This is such a wonderful opportunity. I am a communication major undergrad at Cornell University, and I have immense interest in specifically entertainment field. And so this is a question for Megan, but I'd love if anybody wants to answer as well. So as someone very interested for a summer 2024 internship in that sphere, whether it be managing city concert series or late night or SNL, whatever it may be, what I'm curious is for the next generation of hirees, what do you think is the most crucial thing to help us stand out in our application, and as far as LinkedIn connections and stuff like that? I'm wondering if you could please help provide some insight onto that process.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, appreciate your question. I will caveat and share that we do have a separate early career recruiting team that focuses specifically on hiring for internships. So while I am not the person doing that or viewing those applications, I think, there's a lot of crossover that comes with that, right? I think when obviously keeping on top of our rotations for those internships when they're becoming available is going to be critical, right? Because those are happening at certain parts of the year. So from a logistical standpoint, that's a big recommendation for you. From there, expressing your interest in that entertainment piece and knowing that you want to be involved in that piece of the internship program, I think will be helpful. And doing that through showing, whatever experience that you have. So whether you've had other experiences through your university, through other internship experiences, and just being able to kind of show how that would translate into that internship opportunity, I think is certainly something that the early career team would be looking out for.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Do I click leave or how does this work?
You can, yeah, there you go. I was gonna say, well, we got it for you. So that does kind of lead me to our next question, not so much, of course, about early career and internships, but just in general, like recruiting within each business. Ed, could you give us an idea of some of the roles that you fill for NBC Sports Next?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when we talked about NBC Sports Next as being kind of that digital aspect of it, so very similar to what Megan said, a lot of behind the scenes, developing these apps, developing these websites and things of that nature. We really have that whole business operations range. So sales, marketing, and when I say marketing, more on that digital side, even though we do have the traditional marketing as well. And then along with that, the analytics piece of things, how are things performing? We have to have people that, run revenue and do our accounting. So we have all of our corporate functions type jobs, as well as support. So when we get these apps out there, are our customers happy? What can we do to hear their voice and create new products? So support roles are there, as well as IT and tech. So really it runs that full range, things that you wouldn't think about. But a lot of times when I talked about kind of the intersection of, sports and technology, a lot of people may have come from a sports background and didn't realize, hey, I can work in a business function. I used to be a baseball player, or I used to be a golfer, and it didn't work out that way. And these are some of the ways that they can really infuse themselves into the business and really help develop these things, for each sport. So yeah, that's pretty much the range for us for NBC Sports Next.
Awesome, thanks, Ed. So I know we had a question from Josh Myers, which sounds like it was addressed to me. He had asked that he wanted to get my advice on how to stand out in an entry-level job, role within news, and what we as recruiters particularly look for when combing through resumes. So in general, in all honesty, it really, of course, depends on the role itself too. But when we're talking about entry-level positions, so say if it's within news and we're talking production, like a PA role. So of course, if it's for a show like I'm recently working on with Nightly News, right, we're looking at, if at all, any news experience, but also I'd say a lot of the times we're looking at your passion for the news side versus the production experience, or your passion for production, because you can be passionate about production and yet want to go into Megan's side of the business or Ed's side of the business. So you should often lead with your interest in the show or the brand, or because the job piece obviously is important, but that's going to kind of come second when at the end of the day it's about the show and the brand. But when you're saying you want it, like as far as standing out, it can be as simple too as like the resume and making sure that you're really highlighting, like look at the job description and see, is there anything that the qualification section has that I have, but I actually didn't put on my resume. Again, it can be as simple as that. So it would, again, depend on what area of the business that you're talking about within news and entry-level jobs, because it can differ. But like desk assistants, production assistants for news tend to be very similar in terms of what we look for. Researchers, APs is a little bit more outside the early career. That's where, ideally you have that experience as a researcher or PA prior, but that also depends on the brand. So we can get into that in a little bit. But I also wanted to bring up Danielle, since you've popped on, if you had a question for us. Danielle, if you're having any issues, we'll come back to you as far as the audio. But to jump in, Megan, I wanted to kind of ask you the same question as far as, entertainment side. So what kinds of skills, are you looking at for shows and networks? Like what do they look for when it comes to entertainment?
Yeah, absolutely. So within our shows and our networks that we're hiring for, we have an incredible diversity of types of positions, right? So within one network or one show, we can be hiring anything from an accountant to an associate producer, right? So beyond what we just discussed, which is just, shows and networks are going to want to see that brand awareness from you. Beyond that, the skills we're looking for are going to be unique to the position. So the job description for each role that you are applying to is going to be critical. And I would say even amongst different networks and different shows, a position with a similar title may have very different types of responsibilities just depending on that, right? So I always recommend, really digging into those responsibilities for the position and understanding where your experience is transferable. I always say resumes are living, breathing documents, right? So you may have experience coming in that's a little bit more general, and then you're applying to a more specific position. Always make sure to go into your resume before applying to a specific role and make sure you're highlighting the specific skills that job description is outlining for you, right? If they're saying in their first couple lines of responsibilities that their team is looking for certain skills or certain experiences and you have those, as a recruiter, I want to easily and quickly be able to see that on that resume, where that is. So definitely be digging into the job description to feel that you understand the type of role that you're applying to and make sure you're highlighting your skills because that is where we need to see it, right? We need to see it on that resume in case we don't get into the step where we get to have a conversation, right? So that would be my biggest advice.
Awesome. Thanks, Megan. And Ed, we got a question for you in the chat. It said, how would you transfer from sports broadcasting to sports marketing?
Oh, that's a good question. They're a little bit different in terms of the worlds there, but there are some similarities from maybe some skills. I think if you're in the broadcasting arena, you definitely have the background there. In terms of the industry, I think where the biggest leap is, or might be the biggest hurdle, is the marketing side of house. Because when we're talking about, Megan had just mentioned about, digging into the job description, really looking at what are some of those responsibilities that, we're looking for to, find that right candidate. You may have some of that from the broadcasting experience, but you may have to pull that from other experiences outside, volunteer events or volunteer situations, other careers that you've had or other jobs that you've had, even projects and hobbies that you do at home. So think about it as when you're looking at your job and maybe you're taking that lateral leap or what have you, you may have some skills in one bucket, but you may be a little bit deficient in another. But how can you fill that bucket up through other experiences, not just the job that you do day to day, but through your whole, journey in your career that might actually be, from a marketing perspective. So I would definitely do that with your resume, but I will also reach out and maybe even do some networking and informational sessions with people that are maybe in the company that you work with to find out a little bit more about what are those things that you can do. As well as folks on LinkedIn, there are a lot of people who, will gladly have a conversation with you, to guide you or mentor you, with those journeys. So.
Awesome. Thanks, Ed. And Addie, I know you have a question we're going to come back to in just a moment. I did want to address, on the news side, because I know we've talked sports, we've talked entertainment and kind of the differences in skills and what teams, hiring managers, and recruiters are looking for. So when it comes to news, again, right, there's a lot of variations for different types of roles like producers. So for instance, if we're looking at the digital streaming side, I recruit for Today All Day, and I have recruited for News Now. But having said that, like an associate producer for Today All Day, for instance, they need to be pretty well versed in Premiere. That's oftentimes what our hiring managers are looking at, because of course Premiere is the system that they're mainly working in. Whereas with News Now, it might be ideal to have skills in Premiere as an AP. But if you're, say, more familiar with Avid and not as familiar with Premiere, like we can train you on that. So oftentimes, again, going back to the job descriptions, when you're looking at qualifications, that's where you can usually see, because as recruiters, we're reviewing those before we post them. So we're trying to make sure that's clear, like if it's a must-have Premiere skills versus a, must-have video production or, video editing or skills in a video editing software, ideally Premiere. That tells you, okay, well, the team uses Premiere. I haven't had that much experience with it, but they're flexible with it. So also it's same thing but different is when you look at jobs within the same brand, like MSNBC, for instance. Of course, there's going to be pretty big difference between a segment and a line producer. Segment producers are usually handling the scripts and researching for segments, whereas line producers are more the key players in editorial conversations and decisions and, big stable control room. So again, just kind of really reading through, kind of seeing that's also part of you, again, doing your research on the types of roles that maybe it might not be your next step, but kind of down the road and what you want to work towards. So now, Addie, I know, again, you had a question, so we'll let you on.
Hey, thank you guys so much for doing this. It's been so informative already. My question is specifically for Allie. I'm a student at Western Kentucky University, and I work in local news in Louisville, Kentucky. I'd love to work for NBC, but I'd like to know kind of the ways you think young journalists can kind of best transition those skills to moving from local news or a college station to more of a network position, and kind of what is the best way for young people to get their foot in the door.
Yeah, that's a great question. I've answered it often for folks that are early career that do want to be on air. And I tell them, because I like being transparent, honest with people, is, when you're early career starting out, and you may know this already, like getting on air right away, it's not that easy. It's not necessarily going to happen right away. So I often encourage people definitely looking at starting local level and beefing up their skills in the other areas of being kind of more of an MMJ. So in some ways, like if you are more interested in, like, you want to produce, you want to be able to produce, working on some of the producer skills. Also, if it's social media, or if it is more the written editorial side, beefing up those skills. And then kind of the other pieces, like I said, you can, of course, be honest, like, yes, I do want to be on air, but knowing that there's other areas, because when you kind of become that triple threat of, well, I can do it all, and it's not the only thing, you kind of, I think in some ways it's just a little bit easier to, advertise those skill sets and lead with that. And again, sometimes whenever I've seen it happen, it's been a little bit more organic with the on air, just because I don't hire for on air. Most of the folks on my team don't hire on air. So knowing that going from local to network, again, I think, just getting those skill sets in some of those other areas, not losing sight of the fact that you still want to be on air, but being able to kind of elevate from there.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Of course. And so let me just check here. So I believe, Amina, you also had a question for us?
Yes, I just wanted to know what's the biggest or best advice or tip that you can give someone beginning to start branching out, to start applying to other places outside of the local level as on-air talent. And I was actually someone who I got on air right away because of just staffing purposes.
Sorry, I had some trouble getting my mic unmuted. So as far as, and I'm sorry, I just want to understand your question fully. So you're wanting to how to continue on air, but moving up on air out at network. I'm sorry.
So I'm just looking for the best advice, or one thing to take away from this summit, from this section with you guys, how to grow in the field.
Yeah. So, I mean, and I don't know if Ed or Megan, if you guys have anything else to add either to this, but I mean, it for me, I'm somebody that once I kind of know more about background, all of that, is it a matter of is there a particular area that you're wanting to grow within the field as a whole, or?
I like storytelling, so I do like the news aspect of
Okay.
it.
Yeah, well, I would say in general, like with NBCU Academy, we do have resources through them as far as videos, like just kind of advice, Q&As, all that. So, because it really does depend on the person and what they're looking for, as a whole. So I would definitely check out NBCU Academy's website and seeing what they have there, because I know we do have like Q&As and stuff with on-air talent and off-air talent. So, no, let's just see. And then Daria, I believe you also had a question for us.
I do. Thank you, Ed, Megan, and Allie for this session. This has been insightful. I'm a recent MBA graduate from Emory-Wayzata in Atlanta, Georgia. And my question is, how can those who apply effectively integrate unconventional experiences, such as for myself and for others, international living, community board involvement, or stay-at-home mom transitioning back to work, into the hiring process to maximize opportunities? A lot of the skills that you see and opportunities, you're like, wait a second, this is an international marketing position, and it may not be listed on your resume that you've lived in 10 different countries around the world.
Yeah, I think that's great, Daria. It's interesting because when we think about our career journey, very rarely is it linear. I always see things as, even in my own journey. So full transparency, I used to be a teacher. I used to have a music background, and here I am working in sports. So what I think you can do with those moments is find a way to really highlight, whether it's in a resume, whether it's in your LinkedIn, whether it's cover letter, whatever that is from a storytelling perspective, that you can take those bits and pieces that may not be, let's say, for example, the last 10 years may be these jobs, but I had some great experience as a teacher that I need to infuse in my story. And so whether it's, creating career paths for my students, which I, like to do now, or, giving people the opportunity to grow and having demonstrated that, or leading people in discussions, things of that nature. Find a place to tell that story, because those things are the ones that, not only those core competencies that we have, but the other things, those tools in the tool belt that might be unique to you, are the things that we may not be able to see that you want to convey. And they are very valid and they are very valuable. So don't lose sight of that. Yes, we want the application, we want the resume, but make sure you infuse somewhere. And this is unique to each individual where that could be. It could be on your resume, but it could be somewhere else where you can tell that story and the value of that to the business and how that's transferable. So hope that helps.
That's perfect. Thank you so much, Ed.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Daria. And I know we have more questions, and Joshua, we will get to you in a moment as well. But we just had a couple other pieces that we wanted to address, because we know that those are going to be a lot of questions that people are asking or may start to ask, which is just about kind of application and interview tips. So, Ed, if you could kind of give, and you've done some of this already, so you can kind of skip past what you have answered, but if there's any like detailed advice on applications and interviews that you would give, like, is there a top skill maybe that you look for on the sports side?
Yeah, I mean, it's difficult because we, in our world, and I think it's the same with Megan's world, we're called utility players. So I don't stay in just sales or just marketing. We run the full spectrum of different jobs. So when we're looking and searching for those folks, and I know you've heard this a million times already, it's okay. It's maybe, this will be the big takeaway, is really be strategic with those job descriptions. The skills are very specific to each one. And as you go through, there are 3 parts to a job description. There's the actual description, there's the desired characteristics, and there's the basic qualifications. I myself don't do it, or haven't done it in the past, but I know other people will go through the application process and maybe color code it. Yes, I have this is green. No, I did a little bit of this is yellow. And then this is, I don't have this. The more you see of that green and yellow, the more you probably be, a better fit for that role immediately, but that doesn't mean that you can't develop into a role as well. So with our roles, definitely be strategic about those job descriptions and customize your resume for those positions, for every single position needs to be customized to the verbiage of that job description, as well as blending that in with the mission or the passion of that company. I know Megan alluded to it, earlier with like the different shows. Same thing with our, businesses, whether it's the passion for sports or the passion for youth and rec, activities, things of that nature. Those are some of the things that will help you get noticed. The skills are a little bit different because they are so unique. But I would say, kind of on the side here, some of those traits that also in your storytelling is with for our groups is to be an owner, be an owner, not a renter, and to demonstrate that, but also to have the agility to show that in your experience that you can pivot quickly, because we're in the media industry, we're in the tech industry, and things move quickly, and sometimes we make a hard left turn after a project. It doesn't mean anything. It's just where the title of the summit, know your audience. We know our audience, and they have a different need now, so you have to be able to flex on on that. But yeah, the skills are very unique, just custom and tailor to your specific branch. And I apologize, the last thing I would say is people question, do I have to know that sport? I think it depends. You don't necessarily have to be a golfer. For me, I'm not. I am a tennis player / music major. And so there are certain areas that you can develop and really grow and understand the business. But if, say, for example, if you're writing about golf or something like that, then obviously you need to know something about the sport. So it's a little bit unique, and I apologize if that's a little bit of a cop-out. But again, I think the idea is to customize and really be strategic in terms of how you're approaching each job, if that makes sense.
Oh, it absolutely does. Thank you, Ed. And Megan, curious for you, what's a good indicator that an applicant will do well in the interview process, which I am also aware is a broad question to ask, but just curious.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I would be remiss if I didn't say that, within the entertainment space, like sports, like news, right, at NBCUniversal, the roles that we have available are very competitive, right? There is a lot of interest in these opportunities. So certainly with a lot of roles that we're coming from, they are going to be looking for that top talent that potentially has that experience in what they're looking for. If they're looking for someone in the unscripted space, do you have an unscripted? If you're looking for somebody in the talk show space, have you worked in a talk show at some point? But I think beyond, that type of experience, when I think about just indicators as I'm reviewing resumes or as I'm interviewing candidates, it's that preparedness, right? So from the application stage, it's somebody that's resume looks great, right? It's clear, it's concise. I saw a question on here, how long should your resume be? I'm still, other recruiters have different perspectives, but I'm still one of those people that what you can get on one page is really going to be the best for you, because it also shows that you know how to be concise, right? And kind of highlight the main experiences that we want to be able to see. As a tip, we have some great information and resources on our NBCU careers page under the FAQ page about what we're looking for as recruiters on a resume. So definitely recommend that you check that out. Beyond that, once it gets to that opportunity where you are selected and we do have an opportunity to connect, it's that preparedness. It's knowing your brand, like we talked about, always bringing it back to that, and having that familiarity, being able to show your enthusiasm for that. It is certainly really important as well. I want to know that you're excited about the role that you're applying to. And I want to know that, again, that you understand the responsibilities of what you're applying to and can clearly and concisely kind of share with me your background and how your background can transition into the new role. So, if those things, I see and we have a great conversation and you're excited and you understand that position. And I can easily see where your skills, whether they are direct or indirect, how they transfer in. I always think that's a great indicator of somebody I'd like to move forward in the process.
Awesome. Thanks, Megan. And Joshua, I know you've been on standby, so wanted to give you that opportunity to ask your question.
Hello, I'm Josh, senior at NYU, and I'm currently in the 2024 Olympics interview process right now. Ed, Megan, Ali, thank you so much for sharing your time with us. So question is specifically for Ed. What media companies and sports partnerships do you look for inspiration to pioneer the next idea? Or where do you draw inspiration from other companies to put forward?
Yeah, Josh, that's a great question, and thank you for that. Are you speaking more from like the production side? Are you speaking for the digital side? Can I clarify that a little bit?
Definitely production side.
Yeah. I think we have a whole team of folks that do a lot of research into, what are some of those metrics from an audience perspective? What are people looking at? What are they wanting? I myself, I'm just not tied into it, so I don't know that I can be, a true subject matter expert into it. But they're always looking at those demographics, those ratings and things of that nature, and also what's on the cusp of things. I mean, there's so many things from a content perspective that's not linear, that are more digestible in the social media space or the streaming space. So I think we're constantly looking at numbers, looking at what's on the cusp of things, and really listening to the voices of our audience. That's again kind of the whole idea and theme for this event is know your audience. And I think those folks, in our Stanford location do a really good job of that, not only just from a programming standpoint, but even just kind of those little helpful bits, from a social justice standpoint and all those things that, encompass our culture. So I don't know specifically like what's on the frame or privy to that, but I would definitely stay connected with our brands to see what's coming up, because definitely there are a lot of things that are coming up.
Thank you so much.
Awesome. Thanks, Ed. Well, everyone, we're hitting time here. So first and foremost, I thank you to all those who have been waiting. And please just, if you have any other questions that we weren't able to answer that you wanted to ask, just ask, put them in the chat and we'll try to address them post-summit. So thank you for your patience. But hopefully this helped a lot of you today. You maybe learned a lot today, or at least got some, helpful advice from Megan, Ed, and myself. And thank you, Ed and Megan, for joining. We really appreciate you sharing your expertise in your areas with everyone. And thanks to all of you, in our virtual audience for participating in our summit today. And please be sure to subscribe to NBCU Academy's newsletter, the weekly rundown, and our social platforms just to stay up to date on new lessons and tips for your career. Thanks, everyone.